So I'm Beth Sharratt. I work for GMCVO. I'm project manager on our health and social care engagement project. So we look at health and social care devolution in the widest possible sense. So we look at all the wider determinants of health. We're not just about health services, but actually thinking about all the things that people need to be able to live a healthy life. So in terms of today's session, just to sort of outline what we're here to try and do today, just to give everybody a kind of sense of purpose and a goal. We're looking to gather as much information as we can on how the sector is supporting families who may otherwise slip through the net, so those who really are facing the most disadvantage, and how COVID has impacted on them. We've got a strategic aim today of making sure that the VCSE sector is influencing everything that's happening at a GM level that impacts on children and families. We know the benefits and opportunities that come with getting the sector involved in those high-level strategic conversations. So we really want to push that. And the other thing that we're keen to look at is what the appetite is for coming together like this on a more regular basis as a group of organisations supporting children and families. So we're kind of just going to test that out and see what could work in the future. So Kat, if you could just go on to the next slide, I'm just going to quickly run through the agenda and then that'll be all from me. Okay, so we're really lucky today. We've got lots of brilliant people joining us. So what we decided to do is we've got 4 speakers and they're going to go one after another. So I thought that was, although 4 speakers in one go is quite a bit, I thought it was better than sort of toing and froing in and out of breakout rooms. So that's the format we've gone for. So we've got Sarah from Home Start talking about school readiness, Ayisetu and Miki from Ekhaya Empowerment, Patsy, who's going to talk about some work that's been going on up in North Manchester, and Elizabeth Stanley is going to talk about families of children with special educational needs and disabilities. So we've got a good broad range of topics to discuss. So whilst they're talking, please feel free to pop questions into the chat, or if you're not able to use chat, if the tech doesn't allow it, or you might be lip reading, please hold on to your question until they're finished, and then what we'll do is as a room all together go through those questions, and it might be that different speakers will want to answer the same question, so a bit of a discussion going on. And once we've been through those questions, we'll go into breakout rooms for a bit more in-depth discussion, so everyone can have a chance to contribute. And then we'll come back just for a very quick bit of feedback. We'll take a break, and then we've got Jacob. We've got the. So Johnny was meant to be joining us, but he's actually got a dentist appointment. So Sarah is just going to spend a couple of minutes telling us about a piece of work that's happening to better understand what the VCSE is doing across Greater Manchester to support families. So that'll just be brief. And then we've got Jacob from GMCA talking about the plan, the Children and Young People's Plan, and how that's going to be refreshed and how the VCSE can get involved in contributing towards that. So without further ado, I will go on to our speakers. So it's Sarah getting started.
Thanks, Beth. Just give me one sec.
So I'll keep an eye on the time, Sarah, and I'll sort of start waving frantically. We've got a bit of slack in the agenda, so I'm not going to be too strict, but I'll start waving frantically when you're 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Beth. Hi, everyone. So as Beth says, I'm Sarah Cook. I'm the CEO from Home Start Host, which covers Oldham, Stockport, Tameside and Bolton. We're a family support charity that focuses on the early years. I also kind of wear a few different hats. So I'm the the voluntary sector rep for school readiness and for perinatal and parent infant mental health. So I'm sure you all know school readiness is a key priority in Greater Manchester. So in Greater Manchester, 68.2% of children achieve a good level of development, which is the measure that's taken at the end of the reception class year. But that compares to the England average of 71.8%. So although we've made good progress in Greater Manchester, there's still some work to do to bring us in line with the rest of England. Within that agenda, there are several opportunities at the moment for the voluntary sector to contribute to key work streams that sit under the school readiness kind of broad agenda, really. So in particular, those are around social, emotional and behavioural development, speech, language and communication, and the development of a new early years workforce academy. So the Workforce Academy is something that I'm involved with. I'm really keen that they, and when I say they, I mean the combined authority, think about the Early Years Workforce Academy in its broadest sense, which includes the voluntary sector staff and crucially our volunteers as well. So that's something that I'm really keen to be involved in terms of the development of that work. If any of you know Home Start, you'll know that our model is very much based on a volunteer delivery model. So for us, it's really important that they are regarded as part of the early years workforce. There are opportunities at the moment, and there is a bit of a request today that's going out to you all for anyone who's interested in getting involved in the Workforce Academy developments alongside myself. But also there's a piece of work around social, emotional and behavioural development. So again, it's a bit of an ask. If anyone is interested in either of those two pieces of work and in how you can contribute, then please do let me know and I'll put you in touch with the right people after today. Social, emotional and behavioural development is becoming more and more of something that everyone's increasingly aware of as a result of COVID, and you know, the kind of unknowns around the longer term impact of lockdown on children's development, particularly our very young children who've missed out on those opportunities for socialising, for play, for seeing friends and family, and all of those really crucial activities that help just provide a kind of rich experience for children in their youngest years. So we're yet to see the impact of that, but it's something that we're all very keen to do what we can to support our early years colleagues there. This is just, I'm not sure how clear this is for people, but this kind of just highlights the school readiness context in terms of governance at Greater Manchester level. And as you can see, there's various subgroups and within each of those subgroups, there is already voluntary sector activity, or there is an opportunity for voluntary sector activity and input. So as I said before, you know, if you are interested in any of those areas of work, so particularly around speech and language and workforce development and social emotional, then please do let me know. Something that links really closely to school readiness is the perinatal and parent infant mental health agenda. It's a key contributor to school readiness, those 1001 critical days when a baby is born, but from conception onwards form a crucial part of our development as a human being, with over 80% of our brain kind of developed at birth, and those really kind of crucial days, weeks and months that are so vital for us for our longer term health, cognitive, educational development. Again, there's some key priorities for the voluntary sector at the moment. So there are some small grants available at the moment for supporting perinatal peer support groups. Those, the closing date for that is actually this week, but I think we've had a pretty good response to that so far. There's some pilot work going on in, or hopefully about to start in April, in Bolton, Tameside and Manchester, which will have a focus on tocophobia and loss. So tocophobia, which I didn't know, I had to look up initially, is a severe fear of childbirth and one of the most kind of presenting issues around anxiety within that perinatal period. So hoping to do some specific work on all of that will involve the voluntary sector. In order to support and help people to get ready for that pilot work, there will be a new grants programme, which Beth is just kind of working on at the moment with our colleagues from the Health and Social Care Partnership. Again, that will be very much focused around those areas of tocophobia and loss. And when I say loss, that could be miscarriage, it could be stillbirth, it could be infant loss, or it could be the removal of a baby for social care reasons, and the impact that that can then have on subsequent pregnancies. Another piece of work that we will be finalising and circulating across the sector very soon is to have perinatal and parent mental health champions, which we hope will enhance our reach within BAME communities across Greater Manchester. So, you know, from existing research prior to COVID, but also from knowing about the impact of COVID, we know that the impact within our BAME communities is substantial. We also know from previous research that you are far more likely to die in childbirth or to lose a baby if you're from a BAME community. So we want to do more to work with organisations in Greater Manchester that are specifically working with BAME communities to increase their knowledge and awareness of perinatal and parent-infant mental health. So there will be a champions programme for 12 months that will pay those organisations to release a little bit of capacity to come and do some training and to form a new network. So we're also looking at the impact of COVID within particularly new parents that we've seen over the last kind of 12 months. So one of the things that we're working on for the sector at the moment is some surge funds. So the Mental Health Leadership Group has been able to secure some funds to support the sector to respond to the increase in demand as a result of COVID for mental health support. Within that, we're looking at various things that we can do. We're currently about to be mapping some of the services, which is something I will talk about later on. But we're looking at a skills sharing program as well, which might mean that smaller groups that are very community focused, often led by those with lived experience, can support potentially some of the larger organisations to help to influence their thinking and their ability to work within a peer support model, and vice versa as well, so that those larger organisations can support smaller organisations, and really try to foster some of that collaborative work and some of that partnership work that can help us all to come together as a sector to respond to what we know is going to be a real kind of increasing in demand for our families across Greater Manchester. So new parents and young carers are a particular focus within that work, but they are not the exclusive focus. So it is very much about the wider kind of support for families, particularly relating to mental health support as we go forward. So you'll be hearing more about those areas of work over the next couple of weeks. I think that's about it for me. If anybody wants more information, my email address is there. And particularly if anyone's interested in those work streams that sit under the School Readiness Board, there's various task and finish groups that are looking for voluntary sector representation. So it really is our opportunity to help to shape that work and influence. So if people are interested, particularly in social, emotional and behavioural development, speech and language and the Workforce Academy, then please do let me know and I can put you in touch with the right people at the Combined Authority. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, so as Sarah mentioned, there's quite a lot kind of going on and coming up. And the thing about school readiness, and obviously we'll get into this, we will talk about this a bit more when Jacob is taking us through the children's plan later, is that it's not necessarily a kind of context in which a lot of VCSE organisations think about their work, but actually if you're looking after sort of well-being or any sort of practical support for families with young children, you are contributing to school readiness, you know, whether you kind of overtly realise that or not. So what we want to do is just make sure that people have got a good sense of how beneficial that work is, both for immediate need, but for that longer term need in getting children where they need to be at the start of school. So thank you very much, Sarah. And we've got next Ayisetu and Miki. So I'll let you introduce yourselves and get started.
Hello, hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, I hope you can see me. Hi, right. So
Hi,
I'll
nice to meet you. I'm Miki, and I work very closely with Ayisetu, who's here today to present with me. Aisha, do you want to say hi?
hello everyone. I am Ayisetu, and yes, Miki and I co-founded Ekhaya Empowerment, and yeah, Miki is going to start our presentation, and you hear from me soon.
Right, do you want to go next slide, please?
Yep. So.
Right, so I'm the founder and director of operations in Ekhaya Empowerment. So I'm responsible for literally making sure that everybody's done what they need to do. And then I also engage quite a lot with the community and other organizations that actually feed into what we do. And then Aisha is my co-founder, and then she's also the director of strategy. So if anything is not perfect today, that's her problem. So she's also our communications officer. So any letters, any emails, any information is normally coming and addressed by her. And then we've also got another lady that couldn't join us today, Sauda. So she's our director of governance in making sure that all our legalities and all the education part of Ekhaya Empowerment is sorted. Next one, please, Aisha. So just a little bit about who we are and why we are here is Ekhaya Empowerment is an organization that supports women and children who are coming from communities that are from ethnically diverse, and they're experiencing racial inequalities. Oh my goodness, that word didn't come out there. Racial inequalities, and have been disadvantaged by life events. Now, just to add on there, just a little bit about why the name Ekhaya. Ekhaya is a South African Zulu word that means home. And as part of what we do, we integrate our community, members of our organization with our community. So this means that this is also just as much home for them. So we try and encourage them to be part of the community and part of the wider circle of life, as opposed to just being separated by their racial background. So our vision is just a world where women are given opportunities to thrive in their lives and follow ambitions, and most importantly, just to experience life without any boundaries and without the hindrance of cultural backgrounds. And we aim to achieve this in 3 of our most important aims. 1 is to educate, 2 is to empower, and the last one is to integrate. So we've added some stats there for you that just shows you that about 41% of single women in the UK have reported having difficulties in paying for childcare. And this compares to about 14% of parents with children. And how we're tackling that is that we're also working with Ekhaya Montessori. So Ekhaya Montessori is a childcare service that I own. So with that, we try and help women that might need emergency childcare. They might just need a break from their children, just respite or emergency care. So Ekhaya Montessori then supports Ekhaya Empowerment in making sure that these women don't have the struggles in either paying for childcare or accessing childcare easily. There's a few more stats there that you can read through later on, and it just literally emphasizes on how disadvantaged single moms especially, and which is why we're focusing mainly on single women and single oh yes, single women. I almost said single women and single moms. It's one in the same thing. You're going to have to forgive me today. Come on. So how it started, that's one of the beautiful pictures that was taken in my home, which is literally a similar corner to where I'm sitting at the moment. So we noticed that in the church, at the local church that we go to, majority of the racially diverse community was not presented or was not represented rather. So you'd have pockets and pockets of people that will gather around together and share experiences, whereas everybody else was more or less missing out. So I then came up with the idea of hosting a lunch once a month where everybody, all women from ethnically diverse communities, can come to my house and have lunch on Sundays. And here we'll just discuss the usual conversations of how their days are going, what they're struggling with, what they need help with. And that's what actually started feeding into the bigger picture of Ekhaya empowerment.
Yeah.
So what do we do and what services do we offer? So at the moment, we provide opportunities where our members can get educated through the courses, training sessions that we have for them, and just improve whatever educational qualifications they have. We provide opportunities for them to be empowered. And in these, we have personal life coaching, we have motivational sessions, we have just opportunities for them to feel good about themselves, build up their self-esteem, and actually have the courage and confidence to either embark on or to start on, or even just carry on and finish whatever it is that they genuinely have been wanting to do and have had life hindrances that's not allowed them. And finally, we also offer opportunities for them to integrate within the community. And we do this via, at the moment is only via Zoom, but we do social, Friday social events, which is online. It's a quiz night, and we just hang about, glass of wine, have a chat, get to know each other, and just play games while we're at it. And some of the integration that we do is actually physically integrating within the community by going to spaces where normally the woman wouldn't be exposed to. So bringing them to opportunities and platforms like these, where on a normal day-to-day, they wouldn't know about it, they wouldn't be here. So we would then be the link to bring them in, and the link within local authority and local organizations for them to be able to build and integrate within their local community. So we do this also, I think I've said that one already. I'm just trying to read the point. So I'll pass it on to Aisha. That's it from me. Thank you.
Right, so carrying on from what Miki said, these are the current projects, these are the things that we're doing right now to provide support to the lone mothers in our community. And so you can see here, we've got Meet the Team. We thought it was really important to be able to justify and clarify our position and our authority to be able to actually do the work that we do, because it can be very challenging to build trust, and it can be challenging to ensure that people know that we're the people they need to come to. So we're making a concerted effort to not only just simply say, oh, hi, my name is Ayisetu and I'm the director of so-and-so, say more about ourselves and proactively trying to build up that personal relationship with people as an organization. The Khan Wiggins Kids Club is currently a project that's funded by the Caribbean and African Health Network, which allows for the children, a lot of them from within our services, to engage with the African and Caribbean heritage and just help ensure they have a nice rounded view of themselves, because we are in the UK and it can be quite skewed with what they perceive as humanity, really, because of what they're regularly exposed to. And Ekhaya Socials is what Miki mentioned. Knowing Me, Knowing You is a great networking program that we set up to help people engage in business, because we found that in terms of being a lone parent, especially from the racially marginalized groups, accessing regular work can be challenging. So you'll find that a lot of them do either have side sort of like businesses or end up being self-employed and working for themselves. And we're trying to maximize that opportunity that people already put in work in to help them connect with other people who are like-minded and look like them and can help expand their networks. And then we've got Just For You, which is one of the ways that we are able to fund Ekhaya empowerment, We provide gift hampers as well as a gift wrapping service to people. It's a lovely thing to do, and it brings funds to us. So that's a good one for us. And just looking forward to give you an idea as to where we're thinking and the kind of ways that we try to provide holistic support to people. You can see the new projects, and a lot of them are about empowering people through getting them into employment or getting them more confident, integrate them into the local community by engaging with the allotments, as well as connecting with actual locals from the area, as well as getting them into education, because we've got quite a good network of facilities here in Wigan, and we're really trying to make sure we take advantage of that opportunity. So you can read more about that. And just to give you an idea as to the kind of things that we get from our community, it's really positive, and we benefit from an interactive relationship with the people in our community. We're always asking for feedback, we're always asking for advice, and giving them the opportunity to clarify what they need. And I think that's really so vital, especially when we're trying to get through to the racially marginalized communities, that we ensure that they're able to express themselves without an agenda. It's so important that we're not only ever coming through to our community when we've got a project that we've got funding for, or when we've got when there is a particular research we're trying to get information about, actually just reaching out to the community on a regular basis to do a temperature check and see what's going on. So that was something that I really wanted to be able to highlight. And last slide are all the different ways that we are present all across the internet, and we're really keen to get in touch with people. And we want to work collaboratively. We want to be able to expand our network. We like the idea of what we're doing, and we would like to set something up similar in your spaces. Please let us know. We're looking to expand our reach, and yeah, that's me trying to keep it tight to our 10. I don't think I went too much over.
I think that was almost perfect. I think you were about 11, but I'll let you off. That was fantastic. Thanks, Ayisetu and Miki. I met Ayisetu through the GM Equality Alliance, which we host at GMCVO, and it was just really nice to see a project which, you know, is kind of really peer-led, and you know, that real mix of kind of practical and emotional support, and seeing seeing life through a different perspective. So I think, yeah. When did you start? Actually, I'm not sure. How long have you been going?
Theoretically, 2 years now.
Okay. Yeah, I knew it was pretty new. And someone was asking in the chat which area you cover, and at the moment it's just Wigan, isn't it?
This very second, it's just Wigan. But if anyone's offering expanded capacity, you're willing to do something, feel free to get in touch. We can make things happen.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Really good to hear from you. So we move on now to Patsy. So if you want to share your screen, Patsy, and introduce yourself.
I will do.
And I'll wave my arms frantically when you've got a minute or so to go.
Thank you. That's great. I'm here. I'm Patsy Hodson. I'm Executive Vice Principal of Manchester Communication Academy, well, Greater Manchester Academy Trust. And Greater Manchester Academy Trust has a secondary academy in North Manchester, a primary academy, and a teacher training centre as well. So it's a kind of small academy trust with 3 organisations in. I wanted to tell you about the Family Zone and a little bit about the work about it, but also to just explain the story of it really this morning, and that in itself will tell you why and how we were so inadvertently prepared for the pandemic, because in a sense a lot of the things that were in place because of the Family Zone have really helped us in a kind of immediate way to respond to the challenges that we're all facing at the moment. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is a very, very interesting story and interesting journey. So I just want in this 10 minutes, I've probably got about 6 minutes left of now. I want to tell you about what we want in the Family Zone, what we want to happen, what is potentially going to get in the way or does get in the way, and what we're doing about that to be able to realise our outcomes. When we started our brand new school in 2010, it was with a lot of excitement and sense of privilege and an awful lot of fear and trepidation as well. And we'd got a brand new building built in really ostensibly a year. It was situated in one of the most disadvantaged areas in Manchester and in England and Wales. We'd recruited a brand new team, but we didn't know each other at all. And we opened up on September the 1st to meet into the building for the very, very first time. So you can imagine. And what we asked the staff there, this brand new team of staff who we hardly knew each other, what they wished for the children who were about to come into the school 2 days after we got into the school, the children coming in. And it was only one cohort, so it was 180 children, and we didn't know them. We didn't know their families, we had no roots in the community, we had no context at the time. And we just said to the staff, what are you wishing for these children by the time they leave in 5 years? What do you want to, what outcomes would you want for them? And we've done that exercise every single year now. This is our 11th year of being open. We've done that, and the same things have come out year after year with no difference really. And it consolidates or condenses, if you like, into these 6 wishes for the children. Now, you might find that kind of rhetoric or narrative in policy documents or in institutional, organisations' missions or vision statements and so on. But what we always say to our staff to do is just to take a minute and imagine that every single child that is in our school, so that's now 1,600 children, imagine that every single one of them would be asset rich and resilient to the effects of disadvantage in their life, that they would make good or better progress at each stage of their education. And you can read it for yourself. They would be physically, socially, emotionally safe and healthy. If you could imagine all those things happening for 1,600 children in one small space, geographical location, and arguably one of the most disadvantaged areas, it would be a revolution. It wouldn't just be words on a page, and so we're fired up with that still after 11 years for really desperately wanting these outcomes. And what we realised very early on is we'd have to understand the barriers to these outcomes and what we would need to do and what would need to be in place for us to be able to at least get onto the journey of realizing them. And to that end, we spent a lot of time understanding the kind of statistical definitions and characterizations of the area where we were based. And when I say a lot of time, I can't tell you how much time, but we also spent a lot of time understanding that and understanding how it might present itself in the lives of children that were going to come through our doors and that live in the area. And we know, and all of us in this conference will know, that statistics about the population of England and Wales are gathered regularly against these 7 categories. So we had a really good picture of, how much income was it coming into the area, what the employment levels were like, what the education was like, what the health stats were saying to us, and so on. What we didn't know at the beginning is how that might look in the life of a child. And in terms of our whole catchment area, we were conscious that it was made up of the top 1% of most disadvantaged areas in England and Wales. So we were able to know all the kind of demographics, but we were also understood the profound and complex nature of those demographics. And then when we looked at ourselves contextually on a map like this, the index of multiple deprivation, which is pretty similar to today's, with the yellow bit at the top right, and that is the top 1%. So we knew it was going to be challenging, we knew it was going to be complex. And what we then did is spent a lot of time understanding how those stats might translate into the lives of our children. And in 11 years, this is what we found, that bereavement in all its forms, so not just that children have lost somebody and somebody has died, but that they might have left half their family in another country, or that the family might be divided or separated to cope, and they will be in different areas. And so they've lost their siblings, they're not living with their siblings and things like that. So loss and bereavement. In Harper Hay, where we're based, we have the highest all-age, all-cause mortality. So it goes logically, we have many of our children who have experienced grief. We've got a high percentage, a very high percentage of children who don't speak English as their first language when they come to, well, they don't speak English as their first language when they come and when they leave. We've got lots of children with housing issues and so on. You can read the list there. But what we do know and what we've had to be intelligent about is that any child who falls into one of those categories in this country and in other affluent countries always underperforms in terms of their academic outcomes as a cohort. I'm not talking about individual children because lots of children buck the trend, but as a cohort, they always underperform. And in terms of their physical well-being and their development, they don't make the same progress as their peers in more affluent circumstances. As a cohort, they don't do that. So we knew what we wanted for our kids, but we also knew how challenging that might be, given that yesterday when I looked at these stats, 86% of our 2 schools, 86% of the children are multiply on that tracker. So multiply in those categories. And that means for us that if they have less chance because they've experienced bereavement or they have less chance because of poverty, then if they've got poverty and housing issues and safeguarding issues in one family, then that's compounded and made them more complex. And so we started to get from a very naive position of kind of jumping up and down about having a lovely brand new £32 million building. We started to understand the gravitas of the situation and that here we are, you know, and the complexity and the way that might reconfigure itself in every single child has a different set of circumstances. And almost like a kaleidoscope, and the turning the kaleidoscope, the pieces will fall differently, and a different presentation of those statistics will be embodied in every single child. And the challenge of being able to say, right, well, now we know that, what are we going to do to make sure that we mitigate the impact of that? And I know this sounds very doom and gloom so far, but this story gets so much better. I'm just going to pick one example out of how a child might end up multiply in those categories. If you look at this here, this is typical of a lot of our children that are in all of those categories. That's a common presentation or a common configuration, that they've experienced loss, they've got housing issues, they're living in substandard housing or no housing, they've got mental health pressures, they are in poverty, they have got safeguarding, potentially safeguarding issues, and they're acting as a young carer in the home. If you just look at this map here, our schools are the little star in the kind of junction of those 2 roads there, Rochdale Road and Queen's Road. One more minute. If you just look at that, all those markers on the map are homeless families. And so if you think about homelessness, putting children into those categories, those are whole streets after streets after streets in one geographical area, so you know the impact. I'm going to zoom on right towards the end now, because I want you to see a little bit more about the family zone. Sarah, what Sarah said really concurred with me before, because we had a very early experience where we met with our Sure Start nursery and we realised that they had a shared family with us, and one of the little boys there had been born with reduced capacity in his lungs because his mum had smoked all the way through pregnancy and continued to smoke. And on my way home that night, I heard somebody making a request on Classic FM for the same age, a child the same age, and asking for a piece of classical music because it was their favourite piece of music. And the juxtaposition between these 2 children, that one was there kind of struggling with respiratory issues at 9 months old, and one knew his own preferences in classical music. And for me, that's when I realised that our school could not work alone, that we would need to work with early help providers. And so we invited all these schools who were in our immediate area to come and talk. We just talked. And what happened in that meeting, I can only describe as miraculous, because lots of people speak about zone-like approaches, collaboration, people working together. This was something completely different. Each one of those head teachers had exactly the same passion, same vision, the same angst, the same challenge as we did. And so we decided to pool our resources. That's literally what happened. And all I can say, it was a Harry Potter moment. It was a from one world to another moment. It wasn't, it is a collaboration, but that doesn't say enough. It was literally a bursting through into a new professional dimension. Now, I knew I'd get into this situation, Beth, where I wouldn't have enough time and you'd stop me. So all I'm going to do now is ask you to come and see, because I can show you so much. I can introduce you to people. I can show you some of the work that just tells you what happens when this moment happens professionally, that you are transported into something absolutely new as a group of professionals. Just to finish the last slide, these are the things. These are not the projects or programs, that's another world, but in this new world of how we work, politically created competition is suspended. We don't compete with each other now for results or for children or for bums on seats. We are one school, and all the children belong to all of us. There's 17 schools working together in this dynamic way. We use a common pastoral tracking system throughout all the schools. We use exactly the same system, which works and gives us information about what we can do to help. We have a shared luxury curriculum outside of the national curriculum. So, for example, we've set up a forest school campus where we have outdoor learning for children. We identify the barriers I've just been talking to you about, and we remove them together. And this includes homelessness, lost funds of knowledge, hidden communities, disposable frontline professionals. I want to talk to you more, and Beth won't let me. So please, blame Beth, but please come and see.
I tell you what, so Patsy, we've got some time for discussion coming up after Elizabeth's spoken. So you'll be off in a discussion room. So if people want to ask you any questions, they'll have the opportunity there, or we can do it as we go along as well. So thank you very much, Patsy. It's great to hear about collaboration making such a big difference to people's lives. So last but definitely not least is Elizabeth, and I should have said at the beginning, actually, it's thanks to Elizabeth that we've got this date in the diary. She approached me a while back and said we really should do something, you know, with the sector on children and families, and it had been on my list for a long time, but she's made sure that it's happened today. And I also just want to say thank you to Kat as well, who's been looking after the admin side of things for us today. So anyway, I'll let Elizabeth introduce herself and take you through what she's got to say, and then we'll have a bit of a chat after that.
Thank you. Right, just checking everybody can see that. Yeah. Okay, so I'm Elizabeth Stanley, and I've known Patsy for, well, a good while now, and every time I hear her speak, I'm always inspired about the work that happens there. And I think just reflecting on what she was talking about, that actually we as VCSE organisations see children and families as very complex, as a whole layered system, and quite often services split them. You can't treat just one section of the issue, you have to take it as a whole. And that's actually where Wraparound started from. So I was a special needs coordinator for 20 years in secondary schools, working in Old Trafford area, and realised that the way that children and families are supported when they have children with special educational needs and disabilities was not right. It wasn't for the benefit of the child. Quite often would have meetings with parents where I was talking about the children's special educational need, and they were asking me questions about housing, about benefits, about how to learn English, all sorts of questions that weren't even relevant to what was happening in the classroom or education. And I wondered quite often whether we identify children as having special educational needs who actually don't. They have other issues such as poverty, homelessness, not having English as their first language, and whether those issues create the special educational needs. And it's a very interesting debate that I find happens quite often. So I left teaching in 2014 because I have a daughter who has complex needs, severe learning difficulties. She's sitting over there watching her iPad at the minute, and she got very, very ill, to the point where it was touch and go at some moments. And I made the decision to leave teaching because it was a 24-hour job, and set up Wraparound to support families of children with special educational needs, but in a holistic way. So we get to know our families, we build a relationship with them, they trust us, we're independent, we're not affiliated to any project, or parents fund us themselves, but on a very, very minimal cost. And we have other families who support families who can't afford to pay. So the purpose of today really is to think about what's happening to children and families that we know during the pandemic. And that picture sort of symbolizes what's happening to many of the children and families that we're working with. They are pretty much just surviving, and they're trying to rescue the bits of things that are important to them. Life during the pandemic has been ridiculously difficult for families of children with special educational needs and disabilities. My own situation with my own daughter is she has 10, 20, 30 different professionals working with her and with us. They all disappeared overnight when lockdown happened. So we went from having support from 7 o'clock in the morning until, and then she'd go to college and then come home and we'd have support in the afternoon. They would help put her to bed, to it was literally just me with 3 children on my own 24 hours a day for 6 months. Even if she had gone back to school, the provisions that were there for her, like hydrotherapy, physiotherapy, speech and language, were not, didn't have to be acted upon because the government downgraded all of the rights for children with special educational needs. They changed the law so that provision in an EHC plan, she's watching Topsy and Tim, bless her, provision in an EHC plan didn't have to be provided even if she'd gone to college. So the pandemic has had a massive impact on families and like mine, and there are hundreds, tens of thousands of, lots and lots of parents across Greater Manchester. The last count, there was 24,000 children and young people with education, health and care plans. And in the main, those families and children are just the top of the iceberg of children with special needs and disabilities. So that's Isabel, that's my girl, with one of her carers, Sue. They were at Seashell last summer. She was having a fantastic time. I just wanted to give you a bit of context into her. She loves being outside, and she'd be outside in all weathers. We went yesterday to go and get some new boots so she can improve her walking because her mobility's deteriorated. Yeah. So here's an example that I've used a number of times actually. I think if you're not a parent or you don't have friends who have children with special needs, it's difficult to appreciate how many professionals are involved with us and the child and the family. She has 2 filing cabinets of paperwork in the front room, and I class myself as fairly organised. So if you add on families who don't have English as their first language, families who are struggling to afford to pay the bills or food, if you add that on to what they have to manage in terms of supporting their child, it's too much for anybody. It really is too much. If you look at Isabel's there, so she has community, our local community, family and friends, the community paediatrician, community nursing, community epilepsy team, social care agencies, health, physiotherapy, speech and language therapy. And it's just a lot of people and professionals to manage. And what started me on this journey really was actually there was a moment in my kitchen about 5 or 6 years ago, and I looked at the wall, and on the wall we had a speech and language plan, a physiotherapy plan, an occupational therapy plan, an individual education plan, and they all had different targets on. And there was about 20 targets when I counted them up, and I just thought, we can't work like that. So I just took them all off the kitchen wall and just picked 4 that we were going to focus on. And there were things like helping Isabel make a piece of toast, helping her put her shoes on, teaching her to say, hello, how are you? Really basic things, but there was too many and we couldn't cope with that. So whenever we talk to families and young people, if they're as part of the conversation, we always say, what is it you want? Forget about all the plans and all the paperwork. What do you want to achieve and what do you want to do? What do you like doing? And we work from there. So again, talking about the pandemic, I am very lucky that I co-chair a work stream across Greater Manchester that is looking at the experiences of parent carers. And that's been going on for a good few months. At the moment, we have a survey that's open. We've had about 200 responses, and I'm not going to pull any punches and say, I was looking yesterday and it is seriously depressing, very, very depressing. And I came away from reading some of the responses thinking, do you know what? I think we're going to lose people here. People are literally on the edge. And I just wanted to read you a couple of the comments that were made on the survey. Obviously, it's about parents, mainly mums, making comments on their experiences of support across the pandemic situation. One of the comments says, I have no life since my son was born and not one break from my role as a carer. COVID has made his behaviour worse due to his favourite activities being inaccessible, swimming and soft play, for example. I was having to sleep whilst he was at school. He sleeps for 2 hours a night. And now I'm so tired that I feel dizzy and keep fainting. I cried until I couldn't cry anymore a long time ago, but have gotten used to just existing rather than having a life. And I think that those 2 quotes, there was hundreds of them on there, just sums up how parent carers are feeling at the minute. And if you don't have strong parents who are emotionally secure and know that their children are going to get the right support, they can't support their own children. And I just wanted to finish off with a picture of Isabel, because she's my why. She's my reason why I do this. And yeah, that's all. I just feel very, very passionately that the voices of children and young people, their parents, and especially those that have disadvantage in whatever shape or form, need to be part of every single conversation threading through everything that happens across Greater Manchester. And that's why I push to make sure that these types of assemblies and conversations continue happening. Thank you.
Liz. Thank you, Elizabeth. Really, really powerful stuff. And it's reminded me of something I've heard said about the pandemic, which is, you know, we're all in the same storm, but we're not in the same boats. You know, and a very powerful illustration of that there. So thank you for sharing with us. So I know we've gone a bit over time in terms of speakers, but I think everyone had some really important stuff to say. So I'm glad we've had a chance to hear from everyone. So it doesn't look like we've had any sort of questions to the panel in the chat, unless I've missed anything. So what I was going to suggest now is that we go off into separate groups just to have a bit of reflection on what we've heard, and to come up with any sort of priorities or questions that we want to come back into the room with, not necessarily to be answered today, but just to think about how we want to move forward as a sector in sort of contributing to how we work better with how we ensure young people and families are really at the heart of all that policy making. So Kat in a moment is going to break us off into separate rooms. So we're on 11 o'clock. So let's say should we do 12 minutes of discussion? We do 12 minutes of discussion, and then we'll have time to come back together and do a bit of feedback before we take a break. Right, okay. So in each group we had sort of a note taker, but you may it may be that person or someone else who wants to feedback. But if everyone just has a minute or two just to feedback what happened in their discussion, that'd be great. So who can remember if they were in room 1? If you don't know what, I know I was 3.
I don't know what numbers were.
No, don't worry. Well, I'll pick on you first, Elizabeth. That's all right. Are you feeding back?
Yes, that's fine. We talked a bit about the fact that the Greater Manchester Children's and Young People's Plan might need to be shorter in time length. So rather than being 3, 4, 5 years, maybe it needs to be just 1 or 2, because we need to start from where families are now and their experiences and how life is for them now, which is very different to when the plan was originally written. These are not normal circumstances. We talked about the very good work that's happening across Stockport with organisations distributing wellbeing packs and food packs. And we talked quite a bit about the fact that children and young people and families' voices from the VCSE sector and organisations needs to perhaps be more coordinated, so that Greater Manchester organisations, GMCA and the Health and Social Care Partnership, when they are developing policies or thinking about changing something, that before they start planning it, they'll come to that network and group of organisations and say, what do you think about that? Or we're looking at something like, for example, mental health, so that they can then go to those organisations and say, how are things for your families that you're supporting, so that the changes that are made based on the experiences of what families are going through now.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Elizabeth. So Nat, were you 4? That means Sarah, you must have been 2.
Thanks, Beth. So we had a bit of a chat first, just hearing about the different pieces of work that people are involved in. There's just some fantastic work going on, and I think on the back of that, we all kind of agreed that these kind of networks are so important, and it would be really good to have more of this kind of thing, just to simply find out what everyone else is doing so that we can signpost a bit better. But also we all kind of recognise the level of need out there that is just increasing, whether that's children, young people facing increased self-harm and lack of access to those children, young people through not being able to, providers not being able to physically get into schools because of restrictions. Digital delivery is good, but it's not always as good as face-to-face. So we're kind of missing out on some of that. But also the level of mental health, stress and anxiety that we're all seeing with parents as well, as a result of just trying to juggle everything, trying to deal with everything, but also the financial impact and the increasing poverty and the impact that that's having for families overall. We all kind of recognise that none of us can respond to that in isolation, and as a sector that we are far stronger by collaborating and working together. But we can only do that if we know who we all are and where we all are and what we all do. So yeah, we just kind of felt more of this would be great. Thanks, Beth.
Thank you, Sarah. From our discussion, so we had a really interesting mix of people from different organisations and people who I've not met before, and there's a lot of names and faces today that are new to me, which just shows how much stuff is out there. And yeah, we were just saying how wonderful that is, and also the benefit of coming together for practical reasons so we know what each other's doing, but also there was a sense of a bit of kind of moral and peer support that we can give each other. You know, one person in our discussion talks about feeling like they're not able, that they're not doing enough, and I think there's probably been moments where everyone's felt like that, but rest assured that that's not the case. Everyone is doing amazing stuff in really trying circumstances. We also talked about how when it comes to working with families, it's kind of a visceral thing, you know. It's not all about it's a very human thing to help people in a very practical and emotional way, and that when the organisations that we had in our room, they might on the tin look like they do one thing, but actually that only scratches the surface of what they're really offering in terms of support to families. And we also had some interesting stuff from there was someone from Manchester Women's Aid, whose name I didn't make a note of, apologies, about sort of the ways they've been adapting their support to children in refuges and when they're in the community as well. So, you know, some kind of thinking a bit differently as to how to still work with people during lockdown as well. So yeah, similar, definitely worth networking and lots going on. And I'll pass over to you, Nat.
I think we just got straight into talking about kind of reflections on the presentations and kind of reaffirming, I think, how massive the impact is on families, parent carers in particular, and the reality is probably a lot worse than is known by a lot of people in the public sector that are developing strategies, policies, funding programmes. That this network is a great idea, and that a collaborative approach is the way to go as a way of providing, I guess, coordinated info, so that funders and commissioners, I guess, have more of a mandate. They have that info that can be put into strategies to enable commissioners to fund this work more easily. I think that was one perspective from our conversation. We spoke about the role of Health Watch in bringing the stories of parent carers and the issues around access to health services and support a bit more to the fore and part of this conversation. And when talking about collaboration, a lot of how funding is set up pits organisations against each other, and if we can kind of change that conversation and that way of working, more, I guess, working more collaboratively with funders, so that it's a bit more coordinated and less about pitting organisations against each other, and working with a network such as this, that would help that to happen, so that we can be a bit more stronger together, I guess.
Thanks, Nat. Right, okay, that's lots of food for thought, and really great to have all those kind of ideas in our heads before we go into our discussion about the GM Children and Young People's Plan. So we're going to have a little break now. So we're just gone 25 past, so we'll come back at 25 to, so just shy of 10 minutes. Get yourself a brew, have a little walk around, and then yeah, we'll Sarah's just going to quickly tell you about some work that's going on with the mental health surge, and then we'll hear from Jacob from GMCA and have some time to ask him some questions. So I'll let you all go for a break, and I'll see you back here very shortly. Thanks, everyone. So the bulk of this last section of this morning's session is going to be with Jacob Botham, who's very kindly joined us from GMCA to talk through the Children and Young People's Plan and how, as the VCSE sector, we can work together to influence it moving forward. But just before we get started on that, Sarah's just got something to tell everyone about that's going on as part of the mental health leaders work at the moment. So Sarah, I'll pass over to you just for a couple of minutes to run through that.
Thanks, Beth. Yeah, so as mentioned a little bit earlier, the Mental Health Leadership Group has secured some funding to do some work in response to the surge, the increase in demand for mental health services as a result of COVID. Part of that work is around support for families. But I think what we all kind of recognise within the group is that we haven't really got a good idea of what the voluntary sector activity is across Greater Manchester relating to family support. We know that there's great work going on out there, but nobody's ever really kind of stopped and thought about what is going on with us as a sector that specifically relates to families. So we are doing a piece of work that's trying to map all of that. And as part of that work, we've put a survey together. So be really grateful if any of you who feel that your work relates to the mental health of families, and many of you will have work that relates to that. If you can complete that survey, it shouldn't take any more than 10 to 15 minutes, if that. But that will really help us to one of the main things that we want to do is to look at a gap analysis and kind of use that information to take to our public health partners to say, you know, there's good work going on over there, but actually there's some real gaps, whether that's gaps in support for specific age groups of children and families, or whether it's geographical gaps. So if you could please just take some time out to complete that. Beth will be able to circulate it to everyone that's on GMCVO's database. But if there's any questions, just get in touch, and that'd be great. And we'll share the results as well once we've got everything in. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, as Sarah says, even though we've got, you know, really sort of great networks and reach already, I mean, even today has shown us that there's a lot out there that's just kind of a bit below the radar. So it'll be really good to try and bring that all together and get a snapshot of where things are at just now. Okay, so I'll hand over to Jacob. Thank you very much for joining us, Jacob. He's going to take us through the Children and Young People's Plan.
Hi everyone, so I'm really sorry I've only just had the chance to join. I've been in other meetings. Just sorry, that review of the family support offer, by the way, I'd be very interested to see the outcome of that as well. I've just been with another hat on, still quite heavily involved in the troubled families work. I've just been doing a review of how districts are using funding, including to what extent that funding's flowing down to VCSE organisations. So I'd be quite keen, Sarah, if we could link up on that, because it sounds like a really valuable piece of work, actually, particularly understanding where the gaps are. But I'll pick that up offline if that's okay. Quick update on Children and Young People's Plan. Just go on to the first slide. So GM Children and Young People's Plan was drafted in 2019, pulled together quite quickly, to be honest. It was kind of a culmination of or a recognition of the need for us to try and get some of the work that was happening at a greater Manchester level, support children and young people into one place, and try and provide a bit of direction for the next few years. And I suppose it was there supposed to act as a bit of a reference point, probably more for organisations and communities, if I look back at it now. Seek to sort of align to some of the stuff that was already in the Children's Health and Wellbeing Framework, pull in new areas of work. I mean, people always assume that the Children and Young People's Programme of Work at Great Manchester has been there a long time. It hasn't actually. This was when it first really formally got going. It wasn't that there wasn't activity happening around care leavers and other particular groups, or there wasn't anything happening at a GM level around SEND. But this was our first time where we really start to think, actually, what are we going to be doing? What's our priorities for the next few years? And start to get some of the resources together and organise, so some of the programme resources organised to be able to deliver it. And I think the document's been shared, or a link to the document has been shared, but essentially identified set of priorities, talked about the current state, what the changes we're looking to make, what we'd want from a sort of future state. And at the same time of having that children's plan, we start to try and get a grip of some of the governance that sat around the children and young people's work as well. So set up a GM children's board that's still meeting today. It's got the exec members from each of the local authorities, DCSs, partnership colleagues from the partnership, Justice World, and we've gradually, I suppose, strengthened the the governance around the children and young people's work over the last couple of years or so, to try and, I suppose, hold ourselves to account really for delivery of what's in the plan. Just flick on to the next slide. Thanks a lot. So, like I said, I'm not going to go for absolutely everything, but this is what was identified as priorities. It broadly followed a life course approach. So school readiness, quality education outcomes, looked after children, care leavers, ready for life, healthy children, safe children, young people. We kind of followed a life course with it, but it also picked out particular groups of young people where there was either a lot of activity already happening or where we felt we needed a sort of an additional focus. And if you just flick on to the next one. And so I suppose that, you know, we're at a stage where we're in the last year of this plan, and it's kind of, you know, we're in, I suppose, in reflection mode around, have we delivered what we said we would do? And I think we have in some places. If you look at the detail within the plan, you know, there's things we can say, actually, you know, we've delivered on that commitment, we've delivered on that priority. There's also stuff that we haven't as well, for various reasons, and also in some cases, you know, the context has changed. So we're literally in the process over the next few weeks of doing a sort of review of you know, asking those questions. What have we delivered? What haven't we delivered? What's changed? Not least the pandemic, and help us think about where we go next with it. The other thing to know is when we sort of, just before we got drafted the current version of the children's plan, we did get some funding from DFE. The majority of that funding was allocated towards the innovation, spread and scale work. So people may or may not know, we've had a programme of work which has been about promoting particular models. So no wrong door model, Stockport family, the Achieving Change Together. So essentially the 10 authorities and partners have been collaborating on establishing those models within their district. So the bulk of the money was allocated towards that. We did receive some funding for our work on looked after children and care leavers as well. In a way, some of that's coming to an end, you know, and so we're in the next sort of set of conversations with government around whether we can secure any additional funding. Not easy when we've just had a 1 year spending review rather than a 3-year spending review. And not easy because we're in a very different scenario to what we were 12 months ago. But we're chipping away and also thinking about, you know, how do we sort of collectively invest across our partners to achieve some of our aims in the future. There's some other big stuff happening. I'm sure you'll be aware. I don't want to make this a conversation about COVID and pandemic, but we can't ignore the impact that's having on children and young people. You know, you can break it down across a whole range of things: mental health, the experience of families, children being out of mainstream education, the impact on early years, just the disruption to people's lives, the opportunities given the economic impact. You know, there's a whole plethora of information and stuff out there that reflects the fact that, you know, children and young people's lives are not necessarily going to be the same as they would have been 12 months ago. I'm of the view we need to also look at some of the positives as well. Kids are very resilient, and we need to be spending our time next few months really talking to them about what they want, what they need to try and emerge out of this awful situation. There's also there's a review of integrated care. I had some stuff in the press about it today. Offers massive opportunities if they don't go down a very centralising route. But I think that really does offer some opportunities in the way we commission services and the way we deliver services for children and young people. There's a big review of children's social care. It's just been recently announced. I'm sure that will have implications. I think there's recently been a review of SEND as well, and I think that's due to report fairly soon if it hasn't already. And then the other big thing, just in case we didn't have enough on our plates, is there's a refresh of the Greater Manchester strategy due. Elections will be going ahead this year, so there'll be a hard push over the next few months for us to, to make sure we get a Greater Manchester strategy that will reflect the needs of our residents over the next few years. And that work's just really starting to kick off in earnest. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned before, because we're in the last year now of this plan, it's never intended to be a long-term plan, 3-year plan. We're actually doing a review against what we said. It's going to start in earnest with a discussion at the next GM Children's Board. But I also think there's a recognition of the need to sort of refresh the plan. So there's a few important factors, I suppose, not least obviously the refresh of the GMS, but also was reflecting the impact of the pandemic. But I think we've also recognised that one of the things that we need to move towards, if we are going to have a plan for children and young people, is an integrated plan, sits across health, justice, local authorities, and that's a big part of the work we're doing at the moment. I want to do it at the moment, to try and work towards a single plan, that sets out our shared priorities, I suppose. And a big part of it, and I will hold our hands up here a little bit. I don't think we did, given the pressure we were under to pull the plan together last time. A big part of it is also to really capture the voice of children, young people, and parents and carers to inform the plan. I was heavily involved in writing the last plan. I can say, whilst there was definitely lots of from a sort of project or thematic basis, lots of good work to engage children and young people, it wasn't fundamental part of developing the plan. This time we're really keen that it is, as much as anything, because like I say, I think if we don't connect now with what children and young people need, then we potentially miss a trick. Also, I think we need to get ourselves up to speed with what it's like being a children and young person in Greater Manchester. Not just because of the changes brought on by the pandemic, but it's very different even than what it was 5 years ago, never mind 10 years ago. So we're trying to, in the process now of trying to build a picture, I suppose, of all the activity that's going on that really connects into the voice of children and young people. We've been working, myself and Carol Ewing, I think, who's on the call, have been working with Youth Focus Northwest, and what we're asking today, I suppose, is that you can help us build a picture of all the activity where we are engaging, or we are able to capture the voice of children and young people, and I suppose build a picture not just of all the activity that takes place in that area, but also understand some of the gaps. We've got a survey out there, because if you're going to kind of do this sort of piece of work and get reach across GM, the best way to do it in some ways is to build the information up through a survey, and we're keen that you promote that through your network, so that we can get a sense of which young people you're talking to, how, what's effective in terms of capturing their voice. And I suppose what we want to do over the next few months is then start to use those networks to gather information and intelligence that we can then use to inform the plan, including, and most importantly, what do we need to hold up, what do we need in place to help hold ourselves to account for the delivery of the plan. Like I say, we're clear we want children and young people and their views and their voice is supposed to be a much stronger element of this. I'm happy to take any questions on the plan itself. It's a bit of a promotion of the in terms of the work we want to do to capture children and young people's voice. In terms of, I think there's a question about role of VCSE organisations, absolutely, you know, very keen to capture your views around what it is that we need to be thinking about, what we need to be including. We've not formally kicked off any sort of consultation or anything as yet. We're quite keen to get the ball rolling though. So we also welcome your views around how we can really connect in with the sector and start that discussion around what we need to be prioritising. If I give you a sort of heads up on the approach we're taking with the Children's Board, starting kind of quite broad. So, you know, what are the three or four things that we really need to be prioritising over the next few years? What's, you know, so I think it's probably a similar question that we'll be putting out there, and then obviously our job then is to try and make some sense of that. Put a check and balance in there around what can we deliver within the resources that we've got. Are we still continue to prioritise some of the things that are an existing plan? You know, all that sort of stuff's up to grabs. So I'm very keen that this is the start of the I suppose a conversation about what goes in the plan. But like I say, also your support in helping us get the views of children and young people would also be really welcomed. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jacob. So just to kind of very, very briefly fill you in on the discussion that was going on before you arrived this morning, we had we were all sharing kind of information about the work we're doing and the communities we're reaching, and it was very much there was a very shared sense of the need to come together in a sort of network kind of setup, and that we want to continue as a group of organisations keeping in touch, and I think that sort of network could absolutely help to facilitate some of the voice that you're talking about. So we're very, very happy to kind of continue to pick that up and evolve it into you know, support that would be good for the plan. Yeah, like Jacob said, he's happy to hear questions. So we've just got something about looking towards the next iteration of the plan. Just some questions about not just committing to involvement of children and young people's and families' voices, but sort of investing and involving the VCSE as a partner strategically as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need, well, at a basic level, we absolutely need to be. I think what we are relying on is using, you know, networks like this, groups like that, to do that effectively. So I'm very keen to capture views and ideas about how we can do that better. You know, and yeah, it's tricky because when we talk about one plan, I do think we're talking about the voluntary and community sector as well. And you know, it's not just about the sort of statutory services that are out there. So we're going to really need to sort of find the means, whether it's a follow-up session like this, find the means to really talk through in detail, you know, what do we feel the sort of shared priorities, but a starting point is, you know, views about how we can best do that. You know, I'm not necessarily holding the pen on the document this time, but I am happy to push forward any ideas people have got around how we can really capture both the voice of, like I say, children and young people, but also the sector itself.
Fabulous, thanks Jacob. And there's other areas of the VCSE sector that have got some really great ways of working that we can certainly talk about. There's some really great stuff in particular around mental health, which is a really sort of developed bit of the VCSE sector. So we can absolutely pick that up. Elizabeth, you had a question.
Yeah, hi Jacob. It's about the survey actually. And so when you send out a survey online, you are making assumptions that the person is digitally able to access and technologically able to access the survey, is able to read it if it's in English and know how to translate it if it's not, is able to understand the questions that are being asked, and can write a response or be supported to write a response. So I think my question, not necessarily for this particular survey, but going forward certainly, is how is the authority ensuring that the communities that don't have access to technology, that aren't generally included in conversations, are actually included? So, you know, families who don't have English as their first language, families who don't readily engage with organisations and services, families that we don't even know about. You know, it's their experiences that matter possibly more than people who are readily able to access surveys like that.
So just to be really clear on what the survey is, that for the first part of this is just it's a survey for organisations to tell us about some of the groups or some of the mechanisms that they've got in place to capture the voices of children and young people. It isn't a survey about the content of the plan, because I think you're absolutely right, Elizabeth, but that's the next stage of it for us. We're just trying to build a picture of the groups that are already out there in GM that we can really hook into for that bit that you're talking about, which is then, how do we, what are the priorities, how do we make sure that we're capturing the voice of all, all people who need to have a stake in it. So just to be clear, the survey is to organisations to say, what are you already doing in the space of children and young people's voice? It's not a survey to say what goes in the plan, but that's the next phase of the work.
Thank you, Jacob. So just looking at the chat, we've got a comment about the VCSE commissioning framework, which is a document that looks to improve commissioning with the VCSE sector. And I know that me and my colleague Maria are actually involved in working with GMCA on some of that stuff at the moment. So that's a really good opportunity and a really good tool to help with some of that. There's a question about, what the representation on the children's board from the VCSE sector.
Very limited at the moment. It has been raised, and again, useful to understand how I suppose such a wide sector with such a wide range of organisations can get that representation. I mean, it has been raised before. It's an issue, but again, we're looking for help in terms of how do we really connect the VCSE organisations into the governance that we've got. It isn't, it's not trying to be exclusive. I think it's just a challenge that always is about how do you get that right representation. So yeah, very much welcome thoughts on that as well. I'm happy to feed that in. Smashing.
I've actually got a question, which is just about, so as many people will already know, Greater Manchester has got an independent inequalities commission at the moment, looking at the response to COVID, and it's got specific thematic areas that it's looking at in terms of how disadvantage has played a part in the response and poorer outcomes for certain groups. And I just wondered, obviously that's a kind of short-term exercise in its own right. I'm just wondering how much of the findings from that process will sort of feed into the children's plan.
I'm really hoping it does. Children and young people need to be sort of a fundamental part of all that work for me. So I think it'll tell us a lot about hopefully where we need to prioritise, where we need to focus our resources. So yeah, the challenge with all of this is that we've kind of got to run in parallel as well. So just making sure we're connected into what's coming out of that group will hopefully play a role in informing what ends up in the final version of the plan. The funny plans really, because I do see the value of us getting stuff in one place, and having a plan has given us I suppose a chance to focus our resources and efforts, but it can't be the totality of everything. As we've seen the last particularly last 12 months, circumstances change very quickly, so it's not kind of at the expense of other work or other developments that I'm sure will come out of that. That work on inequalities as well. We need to factor in as much as we can, but we also need to be able to adapt. It's given us structure, that children's plan, but it's not the only area of work that's taken place clearly around children and young people. So want to factor it in. It just, it won't necessarily have come to the conclusions or given us all the information we need by the time we have this plan in place. But, like I say, we just have to be able to adapt to that, don't we?
Okay, so thank you, Jacob. We had just a practical question, which was about the timeline.
Yeah, I mean, we want to try and get, so next 2 months in particular, we're really trying to build up a picture of hopefully what goes into the plan. I suspect the plan will then, you know, we'll have try and get a draft to align with the refresh of the Great Manchester strategy. The plan will probably be a plan for to kick off from the end of this financial year, so early, you know, it'll be from 2022 onwards. Possibly look for another 3-year plan. I think there's risk when you go for like more than 5 years. But you know, we're still working through the detail. This is a bit hot off the press, to be honest. But the work around what goes in it is a priority for the next 2 or 3 months, is what I'd say at the moment.
Okay, great, thank you. And Hannah, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, just linked into that, I suppose. Trying to understand, maybe from a child or young person's perspective, or maybe just from mine, you know, how it all links together, because there is a danger that you've got local authorities doing what they're doing, then you've got the GM stuff, and obviously there's crossover, clearly there is, but there's just kind of, for me, there's always a danger that we're going to lose things in amongst it all. So homelessness is a perfect example, because it's sort of in housing and it's sort of somewhere else. You know, transitions of care leavers, I know there was a priority around care leavers previously, but you know, it's just about how to ensure that everything's running concurrently and we don't kind of lose priorities. So I guess it's just understanding how is that happening, and how do we begin to explain this quite complex dynamic of local authorities and GM stuff to, say, for example, children and young people who often live within their own communities, and that's how they understand where they live, so they don't necessarily know they're in GM, if that makes sense, particularly younger children.
I think we've got a big challenge in terms of how we communicate this and make it relevant to children and young people. I'm hoping that we'll have some good ideas. One of the questions is, how can we make this relevant to the lives of children and young people? So I'm hoping we can be a bit more creative this time in how we do it. It's a really complex system. In terms of what gets prioritised, you know, that's the conversation. You can't do everything. There's not enough resources to go around. So that is the conversation. What do we need to be focusing our efforts on? Doesn't mean we won't do work in other areas, but it's about saying, where do we bring our collective resources, Great Manchester resources? Should say as well, like, you know, it isn't a replacement for local plans. This is about, where do we get value, working at Great Manchester, focusing on issues at Great Manchester level. You know, and that's for me what should determine what goes in the plan, not try and capture absolutely everything, because we just won't deliver on it. So I think this is a dialogue. You know, we need to start the conversation now. What's really going to matter? Where do we focus our resources and efforts? Your point about children and young people is an important one. How do we make it meaningful for them, both in terms of what responds to their priorities and their needs, but also something that they can engage with, and ideally hold us to account for as well. So yeah, I mean, it's up for grabs. I can't answer all those questions at the moment, but I'm trying to get the conversation going, I suppose, and, you know, welcome your views and ideas.
Thanks, Jacob. And I mean, Hannah, I have to say, I've worked at GMCVO for a long time, and I struggle to get my head around GM versus local and what's its worth. So how on earth a kind of ordinary young person can do it, you know, I don't stand a chance. So I think it's just about making, what I've always done is thought, right, I'll worry about the bit that I need to worry about, because if I were to try and get my head around it all, it'd just be too much. So that's my approach, which yeah, has helped me. Are there any other questions? Have I missed any on the chat? Or is there anybody who wants to ask something, who wants to put their hand up either digitally or in real life?
Can I just ask, Beth? So what are the next steps then, Jacob, in how you want to engage with us as a sector in developing this?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to. I really would welcome if, you know, I suppose the feedback in terms of your connections to groups of children, young people, or parents and carers. We do feel that is an important starting point for us to understand, you know, who we can be speaking to, how we can connect into those, you know, those children, young people, and start to, you know, ask the questions, you know, highest level, what matters, what's going to matter to you, where should we focus in our efforts. So that's one part of it. I am, you know, I'm to some extent, I'm asking question back around how do you feel that we can effectively engage, you know, with the sector, and, you know, is it more sessions like this? Do we want to run something like this? I suspect we probably will end up doing that. You can send me, you know, your thoughts directly, and I can feed that into the process. I'm very happy to do that. We're literally at the start of it, Sarah, and just in terms of kind of working through how we can do it most effectively, but it doesn't mean that if people have got strong views or ideas, they shouldn't feed it in. I mean, my sense is to use a network like this, to be honest, and as we start to get a bit more meat on the bones as well, that'll become easier. At the moment, anything's up for grabs, you know. We've not even really moved into anyone putting any firm views on the table yet. I mean, I have my own views, and based on where I think we should be focusing our efforts and what's going on at the moment and what's missing and where gaps are. I don't really want to be putting that out there until we've had some of the conversation with children and young people though as well. I just feel like that is an important starting point, and a bit that we didn't put as much effort and time into last time, to be frank. So I'm kind of keen we kind of start with that, and then we work through, you know, engaging with relevant people on the back of that discussion.
I think it sounds really promising that we've kind of got that opportunity to work together as a sector and GMCA a little bit more. I think, like Beth said earlier, I think there's a lot that can be learned from the mental health model of how the voluntary sector has been able to mobilise around that and engage and represent, whether that's representing one of the localities or representing particular areas of focus. So I think, you know, for me, it'd be great to think about that for children, young people and families, whether there's any kind of version of that we could look to replicate. So I'm happy to have a conversation with you about that if that would be helpful.
I'd welcome that, Sarah. Yeah, I would actually.
Fantastic. And then, someone else wanted to ask a question. Macball?
Yeah, I just want to say, Jacob, thank you for your transparency and openness in terms of communicating with everybody on this group today. But I think what I would really appreciate is that two-way conversation. So I'm assuming you are in phase one at the moment in terms of doing this mapping to find out what our links are and who we're linking in terms of children and people's voices. But what would be really helpful is then once you've got through phase one, you come back and feed to us and then tell us what you want for phase two, so we can actually work with you together on this. I think it's a real opportunity for co-production working together as well.
Support that. You know, we're, like I say, it's only kind of 2 weeks ago that I think we really got, you know, formally agreed this is what we needed to do. We're trying to start the process a bit earlier this time so we can do that engagement a bit better. I mean, when I look at the children's plan now, there's lots in there. I'm sure many of you would agree, you know, they're important areas, and, you know, some of it's hard to disagree with in terms of where we focus our efforts on particular groups of young people or particular challenges that exist. I just want to get it. I think a big part of it is getting it up to date though. You know, make it reflective of where we think the challenge is going to be over the next few years. You know, learn from what's worked, what hasn't worked. And as I say, I'll repeat it again, you know, and make sure that children and young people have got an actual stake in it. So a bit more to understand what their experiences are at the moment and what they will be in 12 months' time, I think is so important. You can't do everything, but I do think that, you know, your starting point should be to connect in with what, you know, people actually want and need.
Thank you, Jacob. And I think there's some reflections from the conversation earlier that'll definitely be able to feed in, and we will sort of you know, explore how we can work together as a network. Oh, sorry, Beverly.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to say that there is a wealth of data accessible through these networks that will allow GM authorities to start to really enhance and focus in on those targets that they are looking at, but to give them the background evidence. And it was the future development of services and budgets that I was thinking of. But I mean, you know, since I've been working for the charity in particular, so much information is coming through, so much data, comparative data, not only within Greater Manchester and within localities themselves, but also, you know, intercontinental and global data that's coming through that helps to assess all this. And I have tons of that on my computer. I can bore you for hours, but I'm sure it's the same for everybody else on here. So, you know, I think you might have just found rich pickings, Jacob.
Yeah, I hope so. And that point about, you know, using the data and the intelligence that's out there needs to be, it's a big part of us saying where we are at the moment, actually. So there's almost like, what's the evidence of where we are at the moment? But it's also, say, there's loads of stuff out there which we need to be thinking about in terms of where we go and the direction of travel with this plan as well. There's some good stuff coming over the next few months, actually, and you know, I don't know if people are aware, but there's a wellbeing framework that's going to go out to schools this year, like a real chance to connecting with a large number of children, young people at once. If we get that off the ground, it's certainly going in the right direction. And then, you know, you've got, you know, we're well aware there's so many groups out there working with children, young people that are valuable sources of information, intelligence. So part of the trick is building the picture up and staying connected with groups like this, so that we've got you know, we've got a feed into the combined authority, and that we're connected into it really. But it's a helpful offer, Beverly, as well. If you are willing to send some you know, some stuff through, we'd definitely take it on board anyway, because yeah, it needs to be a big part of it. Thank you, Jacob.
Oh, thank you, and thank you everyone for your questions as well. Really good discussion. So we'll do some summarising and put something out after the event. But I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth now, who's just going to kind of do some next steps for us.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks, Jacob, for that update on where things are with GMCA at the minute. I think the pandemic has changed everybody's lives beyond recognition. A year ago, we never would have anticipated having to hold a Zoom meetings. I didn't even know what Microsoft Teams was, Google Meet, Google Classroom. I had no idea about any of those things, and the impact on our children and young people and families. There's going to be impacts that we don't even anticipate now. So in a year's time, we'll look back and say, there are things that have made a difference, but we didn't anticipate that being such a big thing. So my son was just in the kitchen. He's just finished his well, I think he was supposed to be doing a music lesson, but I don't know. He seems to be wandering around a lot with his iPad. He just wandered past me and said, what are all these people whittering on about? So, and he's 13. So, and he's the person sometimes I go to as a bit of a touchstone, touch base. You know, the things that matter to him and the way he communicates with his friends is not the way that, you know, we create a policy or an action plan, but does it actually have an impact on the children it's supposed to? They're not interested in action plans or policies. They're interested in what changes their lives. And the only way that we're going to know that we make a difference is by building up relationships with families and young people, getting to know them. I don't think necessarily it's through an action plan or a policy that happens. It's through knowing our communities. And it was one of the comments, I think, Patsy, you said about building up roots in your local community is so vital, because the things that happen in our local communities is where we get our information from. And that's how we know the lived experiences of our families and children and young people. one of the things that's come through really strongly, as it always does, because we had a similar type of event about just about 18 months ago, I think, and that we need a network. We need some sort of forum. We need something that's regular, whether that's every 2 months or every month. There needs to be some sort of organisational structure to VCSE organisations working with families, so that we get together regularly, and rather than Jacob or the combined authority saying, here's what we think, you know, based on our evidence and feedback are the biggest priorities, that we're able to say, actually, these are the biggest priorities to the families we're working with. We tell you what our families are telling us are an issue, and we almost develop our own set of proposals based on what our experiences are from our families and children, rather than, you know, school readiness might not necessarily be a priority to them, whereas it may be a priority to put food on the table and pay the bills and all that type of stuff. So I think that the thing that's come through really strongly is the need to continue the conversation and make sure that there is representation in GMCA, and that representation takes the experiences of the families that we know and work with them to influence change in policies and where the funding goes to, and who it supports, and what will happen as a consequence of today is that I think I'd like to put together a proposal document to go to either GMCA or GMCVO as to how we build a forum, whether that's just a small working group of 5 or 6 people who develop the proposal and say, if we're going to do this, it needs a bit of funding in order to do the network. I don't know yet, but if there's anybody on here who'd like to work with me on building that proposal, I can't see it being more than 2 pages, just to look at how much it would cost, how often we would need to meet, how that would happen, who would facilitate it, and everything like that. That would be absolutely amazing. So thank you very much for coming today. It's just reaffirmed my belief that the VCSE organisations and the people who work closest to children and families, you know, we know what our families are going through and how they're feeling, and that's the most important thing. Thank you.